to this video lecture series for Introduction to Philosophy. This video we continue our discussion of the topic of free will, and specifically we're going to return to the major argument against free will that we began examining in the last video. Now you recall that this argument is called, or I'm calling it, the disjunctive argument against free will. And the structure is relatively straightforward. So first, P1, there are two ways the universe can be set up. There are two ways that events could occur in the universe. Either determinism could be true, or indeterminism could be true. You'll recall from our previous video that we said determinism is this idea that every single event, every single thing that happens in the universe is caused and necessitated by two things. First, the laws of nature, the way the universe is set up, and second, what happened in the past. So the idea is that if determinism is true, then whatever happened in the past, the causes that brings about the events that are happening now, those causes they necessitate what is happening now. Whatever occurs is completely caused and necessitated and must happen depending on what happens in the past. Now, of course, there's another option in P1, and that option is indeterminism, which we're going to be discussing in this video. But first, remember what the second premise says is, well, okay, let's take one of those options. If determinism is true, then human persons cannot have free will. Well, why is this? Well, if determinism is true, then every single event that happens is necessitated to happen by what happened in the past, which means given what happened in the past, things could not have happened differently. So given all the events in your life and everything that happened prior to you being born, all the way back to the beginning of the universe, given all those things, all those causes, it was necessitated that you would be sitting here listening to this lecture right now. And if it's true that all our actions are events in the universe that are caused or necessitated by what has happened previously, then it doesn't seem we can have free will. And the specific reason we can't have free will is because it doesn't seem like we have the ability to do otherwise. If given everything that happened before, it was impossible for you to do anything except listen to this lecture, then how can you say you were free to listen to this lecture? Because you couldn't have mowed the grass or watched TV or played chess. You couldn't have done any of those things because you were determined to listen to this lecture by what has happened previously. So the claim in P2 is that if determinism is true, then there's no free will. But you might say, wait a minute, there's still a second option, there's still indeterminism, which we haven't touched on at all. And you might ask, does that allow us to have free will? What if the universe is like that? Well, as you can see in the third premise of this argument, the argument also claims that indeterminism undermines free will. If the universe is set up in an indeterministic way, we also cannot make free choices. But before we see why that is, we first need to know what is indeterminism. So we can start by just giving a pretty simple definition. Indeterminism is just the thesis that not all events are determined by their causes. So that means for events that happen in the universe, even given everything that happened in the past, they didn't have to happen how they actually did. Right? So even given all the prior events that led to this moment, even given all the laws of nature, if indeterminism is true, then it wasn't necessitated that you had to listen to this lecture. The same events could have occurred, the same laws of nature could have been in place, and you could have ended up mowing the lawn or watching TV or going out for lunch. You could have ended up doing any of those things. So you might ask, well, how is this possible? Right? And what sort of notion of causation does this give us? Because remember, when I first explained determinism, I said determinism is really a thesis about the relationship between causes and their effects. And I said if determinism is true, then that relationship is one of necessity. Right? So cause 1 necessarily must bring about cause 2, which brings about cause 3, which brings about the event in question, you sitting here listening to this lecture. Causes bring about their events with absolute necessity. Given everything that has happened in the past, it could not have come about any other way. Determinism gives us this very orderly, very structured sort of sequence where causes always bring about certain effects. So how is this different from indeterminism? Well, indeterminism is also a thesis about the relationship between cause and effect. But whereas determinism says that relationship is one of necessity, indeterminism says it's a relationship of probability. Given what has happened in the past, and given the laws of nature that are in place in the universe, there are multiple outcomes that could occur, and we might think each one has some chance of occurring, or some percentage or probability of occurring. And so this is the primary difference between determinism and indeterminism. On determinism, everything is necessitated by its causes. On indeterminism, it's just made probable by its causes. And so the way to think about this is, if indeterminism is true, it seems like, at least at the moment, we get back the garden of forking paths. So you recall in the last video I said, well, if we have what's called an open future, that means there are multiple possibilities out there in front of us. That means that given what's happened in the past, there are multiple options, there are multiple ways that our lives could go, and then just branching off from there. That was the garden of forking paths. And if indeterminism is true, then it seems like we get the garden of forking paths back. Now again, the past is closed, the past has already happened, the past can't be changed. So here you are at the moment of choice, you're deciding where, what law firm to work at, or whether to listen to this lecture, or what you want to have for lunch. You're making some choice like that. And if indeterminism is true, then what is in front of you are multiple alternative possibilities. And each of those might have some percentage chance of occurring. Now, it may not be it may not be an even percentage chance, right? What happens in the past matters, right? So given what's happened in the past, given your experiences, given your upbringing, given the way your society is set up, it might be very likely, or even overwhelmingly likely, that you'll make one choice as opposed to another one. But the idea just is that there are multiple alternatives, and each of them has some chance of occurring. So I have this picture of a dice here, because in some sense, that's what choice is. It's sort of like a roll of the dice. And some options are more likely than others, but there's still some chance that any of those alternatives could happen. Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, okay, so we have these two different ideas about how causation works, determinism and indeterminism. And maybe the first question we should ask is, well, which one is true? And there's an interesting philosophical debate about this question, and Kane goes through various reasons, both philosophical and scientific, in favor of one or the other. To sort of sum it up, he says, well, if you look at quantum mechanics and quantum physics, it seems there are very weird things that happen on a quantum level that suggest that maybe indeterminism is true. On the other hand, if you look at the behavioral sciences, the social sciences, and the way we've gotten very good at actually predicting human behavior, it seems like maybe determinism is true. So, but the main thing I want to say is I don't really want to get too much into that debate, because for our purposes, it doesn't actually matter. Personally, I'm not really sure whether determinism or indeterminism is true. I don't really know which of those is best supported by the evidence, but notice that the argument isn't making a claim about which of those is true. The argument we're looking at isn't saying determinism is true, and it's not saying indeterminism is true. It's just saying no matter which way you go, you don't get free will. So with the second premise, we've already seen why determinism undermines free will. So let's look at P3. Why would indeterminism undermine free will? And this might seem like a surprising claim, because in fact, the majority of philosophers, most philosophers who believe in free will, they are indeterminists. And the basic account goes like this. If indeterminism is true, then our actions are not all determined. That means there's sort of some leeway, or there's some play in the joints, right? There's if what you do isn't totally determined by the past, if multiple options are possible, then you have to ask the question, well, what determines what you will actually do? What is responsible for the choice of what future comes about? And if multiple options are in front of you and possible, then they say, well, it's your free choice, it's your free will that is the deciding factor that decides what you will do. So most philosophers who believe in free will are indeterminists. So we might wonder, why is this argument saying that actually if indeterminism is true, we don't get free will? It might seem counterintuitive. You might say, yeah, if indeterminism is true, there's real chance in the universe, I'm only determined in a probabilistic way by the past, then I'm in control of my own destiny, I can make my own choices. You might think that. So, to understand this point, we need to think about indeterminism in a little more detail. And again, remember what it says about your choices you make. At the moment of choice, there is an actual outcome that comes about. It might even be the most likely outcome. But there were other outcomes possible, and that also had a certain probability attached to them. So the main thing to keep in mind is, and I said this before, the choices you make on an indeterministic view are like a sort of roll of the dice. They're like chance. And so the thing we need to think about is it actually the case that we are free if our actions are the result of chance? So, to think about this, we can think about a couple things here. And Kane begins to explain why when we start to think about chance, when we start to think about probability, it's not so clear that this actually helps us with free will. So Kane explains, suppose for the sake of argument that quantum jumps or other undetermined events in the brain or body do sometimes have large-scale undetermined effects on human behavior. So what's he saying? Well, let's just suppose, and again, we're not saying whether this is true or not, but let's just assume for the sake of argument that our human actions are sometimes caused by just undetermined events in the brain, right? Chance occurrences in the brain, which could not be predicted even by Laplace's super-intelligent being. So let's suppose that's true. Kane asks the question, how would this help with free will? Suppose a choice was the result of a quantum jump or other undetermined event in a person's brain. Would this be a free or responsible choice? Such undetermined effects in the brain or body would happen by chance. It would be unpredictable and uncontrollable. I think that word uncontrollable is vital here. Like the sudden occurrence of a thought or the jerking of an arm that one cannot predict or control. Such an effect would be quite the opposite of what we take to be free and responsible actions. So he says, well, think about what a chance event is. A chance event is something you can't predict, and importantly, it's something you can't control. So, although it's not really, depending on what you think about causation, but if you think about rolling the dice, we say it's really a chance occurrence. Is it going to come up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Now, in a sense, it's not really a chance event necessarily, because you might say, given the speed at which your hand was going, given the angle at which you threw the dice, and all other sorts of physical causes, it was determined to come up one of those numbers. But what do we mean when we say it is a chance event? We say it's out of your control. There's nothing you can do about it. Once you roll those dice, it's a chance event in that you are not in a position to determine which of those numbers will come about. And of course, this is what makes gambling fun. It's the chance, it's the spontaneity, it's the unpredictability, it's the uncontrollable aspect of it. But now imagine, of course, that your actions are like that they're like the roll of a dice. Your decision to listen to this lecture, or mow the lawn, or have lunch with a friend, or give to charity or not, or rob a bank, right? All these actions you perform, let's say they're a result of chance events. Well, then are we saying that just like the rolling of the dice, it's unpredictable, it's out of your control? And if it's out of your control, how can it be free? We think that a free action is one for which you're responsible, one which you are in control of. It's an action that we can attribute to you and say you did it, you could have done otherwise, it's your fault, or if it was a good action, it's something you deserve praise for. But if it's just a chance event, it doesn't seem like we get any of that. Kane goes on to explain that there was a group of ancient philosophers, the Epicurean philosophers, who had this vision of the world as just completely composed of atoms and a void, right? So all the world was the motion of atoms in regular and predictable ways. But then, of course, you have the problem of explaining, well, if that's what the world is, it's just the regular motion of atoms, how do you get free will? And so what did the Epicureans say? They said sometimes the atoms swerve in unpredictable ways. They're just these sort of chance events where an atom will swerve and do something that's out of the ordinary, right? They'll do something against its previous causes. But if and this is supposed to account for free will. But if free will is just this random swerve of an atom, if you're telling me that's what caused me to rob a bank or donate to charity or have lunch with a friend, I don't feel any more free than I did when you told me everything was determined. I'm not any more in control of chance events happening than I am in control of previous causes and the laws of nature. And so Kane says, if free will is not compatible with determinism, it does not appear to be compatible with indeterminism either, since indeterminism would seem to be mere chance. And it's important to spell out exactly why this is. So remember, I've been saying that there are really these two elements to free will: rational deliberation and the ability to do otherwise. What we saw last time is that determinism undermines the ability to do otherwise. If determinism is true, then only one future can result, and you can't do anything about it, so nothing else could happen. You don't have the ability to do otherwise. For indeterminism, the problem with free will is the opposite. If indeterminism is true, then in some sense we have the ability to do otherwise, right? Other things could happen than what does happen. So if you rob a bank, there was, even if that's what actually happened, there was some percentage chance, we'll say, that you might have gotten scared at the last minute and walked away, or that you might have listened to your conscience and walked away. Those things could have happened. They just didn't. And the reason they didn't was sort of based on chance occurrences, because the past doesn't completely determine the future. But if that's true, if what is determining whether you rob the bank, get scared and walk away, or listen to your conscience and walk away, if what's determining that is chance, then it seems to undermine your rational deliberation. Because now what's causing you to do what you actually do aren't the reasons you have in mind, aren't your values or commitments. It's just maybe some undetermined event in the universe or in your brain or in your body. And so the main reason that indeterminism doesn't seem to give us free will is that it separates our actions from our own thought process and our rational deliberation about them. So I think the best way to it's a difficult point to grasp, but I think the best way to explain it is with a concrete example. And so Kane gives one. So let's imagine this example: Mike's vacation. Suppose Mike, who is deliberating about whether to vacation in Hawaii or Colorado, gradually comes to favor and choose Hawaii. If Mike's choice, when he finally makes it, was undetermined, as libertarians require, and libertarian just means someone who believes in free will, then he might have chosen otherwise. He might have gone to Colorado instead, given exactly the same deliberation up to the moment of choice. That means the same thoughts, reasoning, beliefs, desires, and so on. It is difficult to make sense of this. So the first point Kane makes is that if indeterminism is true, then we imagine the following situation. There's a whole past behind Mike, and in the past, Mike's deliberating, should I go to Colorado or Hawaii? Colorado or Hawaii? I don't know which one I should go to. He comes up with all these reasons for and against, but eventually he says, Hawaii is the best choice for X, Y, and Z reasons. Now, if indeterminism is true, that means that although maybe it's likely that Mike will end up in Hawaii, maybe it's overwhelmingly likely that Mike will end up in Hawaii, it's still possible for him to end up in Colorado. Because there might be some chance occurrence that happens in Mike's brain that causes him to go to Colorado instead of Hawaii. But that would be very, very strange, because let's say Mike does end up in Hawaii. He had all these reasons. He was saying, let's say he does end up in Colorado. He had all these reasons why Hawaii was the best. The weather's much nicer. I really like the beach. I want to get a pina colada. Then all of a sudden he finds himself getting on the plane to Colorado, and he's sitting in the ski lodge wondering, why am I not on the beach? Didn't my own rational deliberation, my own thought process, my own thinking, didn't it lead me to think Hawaii was the best? So why am I here on the beach? And then we tell him, well, it was a chance occurrence in your brain, that sort of caused you to go to Colorado instead of Hawaii. And we say, and luckily for you, this is what makes you free. And Mike might say, well, I don't feel free at all. I feel like I went someplace I didn't want to go. I feel like it was out of my control. I felt like it was random, chance, arbitrary occurrence that really had nothing to do with me or the values and commitments and things I think are important. And this is the reason why indeterminism separates our actions from the reasons that we have for acting. It separates our actions from our process of deliberation and thinking. Because you can have the same reasons can occur, and you can do the action you can be caused to do the action that goes against those reasons. So as Kane continues to explain, Mike's choosing Colorado in such circumstances in which he had come to favor Hawaii would seem irrational and inexplicable, capricious and arbitrary. If the choice of Hawaii came about by virtue of undetermined events in Mike's brain, this would not be an occasion for rejoicing in his freedom, but for consulting a neurologist about the waywardness of his neural processes. So there's a fundamental sense in which we would say, well, Mike, if you really wanted to go to Hawaii, why didn't you go? And if you didn't go to Hawaii, that just seems irrational. So the criticism is that on the indeterminist view, what we get is not free will. We just get a sense that we're totally subject to random chance events and occurrences that we have absolutely no control over, and fundamentally undermine our ability to be rational beings who can think about what we want to do and then act on those decisions. And as I was stating before, this undermines really the main reason why we care about free will. If indeterminism separates our rational deliberation from our actions, it also gets rid of our moral responsibility. Because, so imagine we have two individuals, one of them who gives to charity, and the other one who very selfishly takes their money and buys a yacht or something. Now, you might think it's fine to take your money and buy a yacht, even when there's people suffering. That's a question for another day. But at least you might be inclined to say that, the person who gave his or her money to charity, they deserve praise. And the other person, maybe they don't deserve blame, but they don't actually deserve any praise. But then when you think about it further, if we say, well, the reason that each did what he or she did was just a chance occurrence. Let's say both of them are similarly situated. Both have expendable income, both are wealthy, both are brought up in the same way, according to the same values, and both have the same sort of commitments. But it was just a chance occurrence that caused one person to give money to charity and the other person to not. Then it would seem unfair and strange to praise the one person for giving their money and to not praise the other person. Neither of them was really in control of their actions. Just in one case, the chance occurrence went the way of doing the morally right thing, and the other way, the chance occurrence went the opposite way. And I think one way to really get a handle on this point is to think about a game of chance. So, for instance, you probably, it depends if you've been around small children recently, but you may not have played Candyland in a while. It may be a game that you played in your childhood, and you go many years and you kind of forget about it, and then you eventually come back to it, which I did somewhat recently. And I knew it was just a child's game, so I knew it would be kind of silly and dumb, but I didn't remember just how fundamentally alienating and fundamentally soul-crushing of a game it is. Because literally all you do is draw a card and move your piece to where the card says you go. The moves you make are not up to you in any significant sense. You're not in control. You're simply sitting there. You might as well be watching a movie, a very boring movie. Because you have no control over any of the events that happen. All you do is flip the cards. In fact, you might think this thing could be made much more efficient. We got a machine to flip the cards for you. And also move the piece, because what role are you really playing? And then, of course, imagine you win Candyland. Well, it's not like this is a great moment to rejoice and praise you. It's not like you've really done something significant. The game was fixed. The game was stacked the moment the cards were shuffled. And we call this a game of chance precisely because nothing that happens in the game is up to you. So now you ask the question, what if life as a whole is like that? What if our supposed free actions, what if the reason they come about is because of undetermined chance occurrences? Well, then it seems like our lives as a whole would be like a game of chance. And if we are not responsible for what happens in a game of chance, if we can't be praised for winning, if we can't really be blamed for losing, then we might apply the same thing to our lives. If you do great things, you just got lucky. There just happen to be the right undetermined events in your brain. If you do bad things, well, you got unlucky. There's happened to be the wrong undetermined events going on in your brain. You just had bad luck. And notice now how similar indeterminism sounds to determinism. With determinism, we said the problem was that what you do isn't up to you. You're just a victim of circumstance. What happened before you and the laws of nature determine what you do for good or for ill. And because that's the case, really, as the lawyer Clarence Darrow said, those who do good things are just the beneficiary of good fortune. Those who do bad things are the victims of bad luck. But now indeterminism sounds exactly like that. In fact, it even says that what are our supposedly free actions just are fundamentally a matter of chance. But if we can't be responsible for chance, if chance implies that our actions don't come from our own rational deliberation, then it's not really clear how we can be free. Now, again, all of this might be surprising to hear because previously I had said that the vast majority of philosophers who believe in free will are indeterminists. And so we should probably close this video by thinking a little bit about how do those philosophers claim that indeterminism gives us free will? Now, their theory really proceeds in two parts. So first, because they believe in indeterminism, the future is not determined, the future is not fixed, multiple alternatives could come about. And then, as I said, the question is, what causes, or what determines, you might say, which of those alternatives will in fact occur? What determines whether you'll rob the bank, whether you get scared and walk away, whether you'll listen to your conscience and walk away? And what these philosophers say is that they adopt what's known as an extra factor strategy. So the future is open. There are multiple possibilities that could come about, each with their own probability, but there's something extra. There's some extra factor that explains which of those possibilities occurs, and that extra factor is associated with your freedom. Now, philosophers who take this strategy have, they've identified multiple different kinds of extra factors. Sometimes an immaterial soul, noumenal selves outside of space and time, special forms of causation, acts of will, right? There's all sorts of different possibilities that you might identify for an extra factor. But all extra factor strategies have this in common. They say there's something else beyond just our bodies and our brains and the laws of nature and causation that accounts for what we do and explains free will. Now, I think the easiest way to understand this is to just take the example of the soul. And a couple of reasons for this. It's probably the most straightforward extra factor strategy. It's a common one. And also, we've had some opportunity to think and talk about the soul in this class, specifically in Plato's Phaedo. So here would be the idea. So in the physical world, we have the laws of nature and the prior causes, and that has an influence on you. But your brain is an indeterministic system, so even given everything that happened in the past, what you will do next is not fixed. And because it's indeterministic, we'll say there's two options, option A and option B. Each of those has some percentage chance of occurrence. And what determines whether you'll choose option A or option B? Well, we'll say the influence of the soul. So on one extra factor strategy, if in fact we have an immaterial soul, that immaterial soul is what accounts for whether we choose A or B, and that accounting by the soul is in fact what gives us free will. And we can see why one would say this about the soul. So think about what Plato said about the soul in the Phaedo. Plato said the soul was the ruling element and the body was meant to follow the soul. And if you think a ruler or one in power is the most free and the subjects of a ruler are the least free, then it makes sense to say that the ruling element of you would in fact account for your free will. So that's the basic idea behind the extra factor strategy. So why can't we hold this? Well, of course, one problem is to make this solution work, you have to prove the existence of the soul, which is a controversial claim in itself. But even beyond that, let's ask the following question. Suppose it's true we have an immaterial soul. Suppose it's true that in some sense the influence of the soul or this disembodied mind, that's what causes us to do the things we do. We have to ask the following question, which should sound familiar. Does the immaterial soul, one, determine our actions, or does it not determine our actions? If the soul is the cause and our actions are the effect, does the soul determine, in the strict sense, our actions, or is the relationship between the soul and our actions indeterministic? Now, of course, this will sound like a familiar question because it's the one we've just been asking. But the point is that all the problems we've just been looking at with the relationship between prior causes and our actions, do prior causes determine our actions or they just give our actions a certain probability? That same dilemma results here. So let's take the first option. Let's say the immaterial soul determines our actions. Well, if it determines our actions, that means our actions couldn't be otherwise. That means given whatever influences the soul, given everything we know about the soul, what we do next has to happen. So given the soul we have, we would have to rob the bank or we'd have to walk away because of our conscience or whatever. But whatever kind of soul you have, that if on this option, that determines what you do. But if the soul determines what you do, then you couldn't do otherwise. And then you couldn't have free will. So the libertarian, the defender of free will, can't say this. They can't say the immaterial soul determines our actions because the libertarian says that determinism undermines free will. So that can't be right. But of course, then there's the other option. Let's say the immaterial soul does not determine our actions. What would this mean? This would mean the relationship between the soul and our actions is indeterministic. Given everything we know about the soul, what you do next will be a sort of chance occurrence. There'll be a probability attached to the various outcomes that could occur. Now you're probably scratching your head and saying, wait a minute, didn't we just talk about this? And yes, we did. The issue here is that if the relationship between the soul and our actions is indeterministic, then we're left with the same problem we had before. It seems that our actions are by chance, they're arbitrary, they're not under our control, they're inexplicable, they're unpredictable. The fact that the indeterministic cause is now an immaterial soul, and it's not the prior causes, the prior physical causes, doesn't really matter. If our actions result from indeterminism, then we don't have any more control over them than we did previously. And so the main point here is that the main criticism of the extra factor strategy is that it simply fails to solve the problem. It just moves the problem to another area. Instead of talking about whether the past and past physical causes determine our actions or if they act on us indeterministically, now we're just asking the same question about the soul. But if determinism of any kind undermines free will, and if indeterminism of any kind undermines free will, then it doesn't matter whether the cause in question is God, doesn't matter whether the cause in question are the physical causes in the past, doesn't matter whether the cause in question is the soul. The same problems for free will come about. Okay, so I will cut this video here. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.